Welcome back if you are returning, and if you're new here, I'm Miranda, and this is What's Left of Me. All right, so before we get into today's episode, I just want to take a moment to wish everyone here in the United States a very happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. I know that this week is very hectic with traveling and spending time with family. Maybe your schedules are everywhere. And of course, there's always a lot of emotions that are tied to the holidays. And you are currently choosing to spend a little bit of your time here with me. And I really appreciate it. From the bottom of my heart, I am so incredibly thankful to have every single one of you here. So thank you and happy Thanksgiving. And with all of that, the busyness, the chaos, all of that, and then getting into an episode where this is going to carry a lot of weight, I feel like we need to all take a moment to ground ourselves. So let's take a deep breath together. Today's conversation is one that carries a lot of weight, depth, and a kind of honesty that not many people are willing to share, especially those who have spent their lives in positions and jobs where being strong isn't optional and it's expected. And before we get into it, I do want to gently put out a quick reminder. I know everyone is very eager for video episodes and not just audio, and trust me, they are coming, but I will always prioritize my guests' comfort and the boundaries that they set. If a guest prefers to stay off camera or remain anonymous, that choice will always be respected here. And their story, their pace, and their safety always comes first. So I really hope that that's something that you can understand and respect as well. This episode is titled Buried Beneath the Badge, and we're diving into the parts of law enforcement that most people never get to see. The emotional toll, the internal battles, the trauma that gets carried home long after the shift ends, and the impact it has on identity, relationships, and your mental health. Today's guest is someone who lived that reality very up close. And before we get into the questions, I want to give him that space to introduce himself in his own words, share his background, and bring us into the world that he lived in back then. So, Stephen, thank you for being here and being willing to have this conversation. I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm Steven, born and raised in Pennsylvania, but I've lived all over. Um, I've lived quite the life from jobs, and you guys are going to hear the story of my most favorite one in law enforcement.
Even just hearing that small glimpse, it's clear that you've lived a lot of life in a lot of different places. So, before we get into deeper parts of your story, I want to start with something a little more in the now. For anyone who doesn't know you yet, who is Stephen today, and how would you describe yourself in this season of your life?
I would say I'm still in the middle of my healing phase, but I'm a father first, above all. And that's pretty much me. That's all I do anymore is work and be dad.
I love how grounded you sound when you talk about being a dad. Like, even in the middle of everything you're still healing from, there's a real steady and intentional energy there. And I think people listening are really going to feel that. Before we move into the heavier parts of your story, I'm curious, what made you decide that now was the moment to speak on this? Like, was there something that shifted for you or finally made this feel like right now was the time?
I think more or less that there's such a stigma around not only being a man not able to speak up, but also in the law enforcement culture, you are supposed to not feel, not do anything, show no emotion, and it's time to break that stigma.
And you're right, there is. There's this huge stigma, not just around men expressing emotion, but especially within law enforcement. There's this expectation to be unshakable, to not feel, to never show your emotions. And when you carry that for years, I'm sure that it takes a real toll on you as a person. I think the fact that you're even sitting here breaking that silence says a lot about where you are in your healing. And I know there are people listening who need to hear someone in your position say exactly that. So, with that in mind, when you look back at your time in law enforcement, what stands out the most to you now? Was it the job itself, the culture, or the version of yourself that you felt like you had to become in order to survive it?
I would say the culture and the version that I had to become. Naturally, I'm just a very big, soft-hearted person, and there's a lot of times in that job that you can't be. You have to be hard, and it's rough. But then the culture's very much like military. You have the camaraderie of the guys you work with day in and out. They become family. You meet their families, and it just all runs together.
That makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate how honest you're being about that because I think people forget that kind of shift from who you naturally are to who the job requires you to be, that doesn't come without a cost. And the culture you're describing, the closeness, the brotherhood, the families blending together, that's a world most people outside of law enforcement, I'm sure, never fully understand. And it becomes your identity, it becomes your home. So, walking away from that isn't just leaving a job, it's leaving a version of yourself, a community, and a whole way of life. So, take me back to 2017. What was happening internally for you when you reached a point where you decided to walk away from law enforcement?
I was about 5 years in. Um, the money's not great in law enforcement. I don't care who you talk to, they'll probably tell you the same. Um, I had an opportunity to move back to Maryland from South Carolina and take a job as a contractor with the Department of Defense, working with a good friend of mine that I grew up with. And I thought it was time to just get out and take that opportunity and be closer to my son. So when I moved to Maryland, it was very more of a culture shock because you go from that brotherhood of that lifestyle living in law enforcement, and you're always looking over your shoulder 24/7 back to the civilian world to where you're just a normal person again. So when you're in that lifestyle, you don't really have time to process and think about all the things that you've experienced and endured. And then I got to Maryland and kind of got to sit with it, and it just started to eat away at me the things that I had dealt with, the traumas that I've seen and been involved with, and started with friends. Oh, let's just go out and have a drink, and then that turned into my friends aren't going out. Maybe I'll just go out myself. It escalated fairly quickly, and then my entire reason for moving was so I can be near my son. And in turn, me drinking did nothing but push him further away.
The transition you're describing is something that most people never see. You go from living in a world where you're constantly on alert, constantly in survival mode, to suddenly being back in the civilian world where everything is quiet and you're just expected to be normal. And when you finally slow down, that's when everything you push aside finally catches up to you. I mean, like the trauma, the things you saw, the version of yourself you had to become. And it makes sense that sitting with all of that would feel very overwhelming, especially when the entire point of you moving was to be more grounded and closer to your son. So I want to ask you about that shift. Do you remember the moment when casual drinking stopped being casual? The moment you realized you were numbing instead of unwinding?
I wouldn't say there's a specific moment I remember, um, but maybe an accumulation of things. Just realizing It went from going out to drinking by myself to drinking at home and not having anybody there either. So just drinking alone at home by myself to where I thought, okay, this might be a problem.
I think a lot of people are going to relate to what you just said, not because the details are the same, but because of how quietly things can shift when you're carrying trauma. It's rarely one big moment. It's usually, like you said, an accumulation. Those little changes you don't really notice until you look up one day and realize you're drinking alone and it's not about unwinding anymore. It's about numbing what you don't want to sit with. And hearing you describe that transition, it ties into something you wrote in the guest questionnaire you submitted for this episode. And just for anyone listening, I do want to mention I have a guest questionnaire available for anyone who wants to share their story, but nothing from those submissions is ever shared publicly unless someone gives full permission. It's strictly used to guide the conversations here. So, Stephen, in your questionnaire, you wrote something incredibly powerful. You said that you became the very person you used to arrest. And I want to sit with that for a moment, if that's okay with you. What did that identity shift feel like from the inside? What was it like to realize you were becoming someone you once had to confront in your line of work?
I felt like I left everybody in my life down. Um, it was rough because you went from being the guy that everybody turned to the guy that nobody wanted to be around.
And I'm sure that had to have been so heavy to carry. So, with all of that building inside of you, what was your lowest point? What was the moment that scared you or made you realize, I keep going like this and I might not make it out?
Um, I would say just after the third incident I got involved in and almost taking somebody's life.
If you're open to it, obviously, as much as you feel comfortable talking about, can you share with us what those incidents actually were?
Arrested 3 times for driving under the influence. Twice was in Maryland, and then I'd moved back home to South Carolina, thinking I'd get a fresh start, get back around people that loved me because in Maryland I had nobody but my son, and at that time he wanted nothing to do with me. Then I started meeting new people and would go out with them. And the third incident, I decided to run through a checkpoint and almost ran over another officer that I was really good friends with. So I think after being put in the back of his vehicle, someone that I considered a friend, it was time to make a change.
That's a lot for one person to carry. Not just the legal side, but the emotional side, the shame, the fear, the realization that you were hurting yourself and the people you cared about. And also having that moment happen with someone you considered a friend, I can only imagine how much that really amplified the reality of where things had gotten for you. When you think back to the night at the checkpoint, is there anything specific that stands out to you? Maybe a moment or a feeling that really stayed with you?
So oddly enough, like, I don't remember the going out part of that night at all. I always drank to the point where I would black out because that was just my style. I didn't drink to just go out and have a good time. I drank to forget everything. Yeah. So I was driving home to my house, and as I always did after leaving the bar, I'd stop and grab food because, greasy food's great when you're drinking, right? And I actually end up rear-ending an SUV. And I don't know what it was or why, but they pulled off and ran. I don't know if they had something going on that they didn't want to stop too, but they kept going. So I continued to drive home, and oddly enough, I found myself parked in a church parking lot. And I sat there for a few minutes, kind of contemplating, like, what the hell am I doing? I've already got 2 DUIs, and like, I'm just throwing my life away at this point. Oddly enough, that church, you could see the checkpoint in the middle of the road from there. But I was so hyper focused on the situation I was in that I didn't see it. And I was like, okay, I'm only like 2 miles from home. Let's just get home and we'll deal with this all in the morning. So then I got back on the road and rode right through it. And they followed me all the way to my house. I didn't stop after I ran through the checkpoint. I don't remember it, but they told me that I turned my lights off like I was trying to run, which I could see why. And I pulled into my house, and about 10 seconds later, about 4 cop cars pulled in right behind me. And they did what they call a felony traffic stop. So I had 4 or 5 officers that at one time were my family pointing guns at me, screaming at me to get out of the car and get on the ground.
Wow. Thank you for walking us through that. That's an incredibly heavy moment, not just because of the danger, but because of the confusion and, I mean, the blackout and the fear and the split second decision that comes from pain instead of clarity. And I think a lot of people listening don't realize how someone gets to that point, how so much trauma, isolation, and numbing can push you into choices that you never would have made in a healthy state. And hearing you describe sitting in that church parking lot, that moment of, what am I doing with my life? That's powerful. Moments like that hit different when you're already carrying so much. I want to ask you something from a place of reflection, of course, not judgment. But when you look back now, does any part of you feel like that moment, did it end up being a turning point? I guess I should say. Was it a turning point that you needed? Almost like it forced everything to finally come to a head so you could change your life.
I think I think 100% if I would not have been through that experience, I would probably still be on that path, still drinking, still doing whatever I wanted to. So I'm grateful for it. And going through it sucked, but at the end of the day, I'm grateful it happened.
I really appreciate how honest you are about that because a lot of people struggle to admit that the hardest moments in their life are sometimes the ones that finally wake them up. And it takes a lot of humility for someone to say, this was really awful, but it saved me. In what you submitted in the questionnaire, you talked about not feeling worthy of a life worth living. And that's a really raw, vulnerable statement that so many people silently relate to. Looking back now, what did that loneliness actually look like for you day to day?
Um, I was in bed all day, every day. If I didn't have to work, that's where I was. Um, would go days without eating, just sitting in the silence in my thoughts. And it was just, I know I had people around me that would help me, but I didn't want to talk to anybody about those problems. They were mine because as a man, you don't talk about it. I confided a lot after the fact of all of this with my good friend Tom. A lot of the things that I had been through because I'd actually met him after all of this stuff had occurred. He was very genuine. He was prior military. He was an MP, so He knew the law enforcement aspect of life, but it was more of a military side of it. And then um, he kind of told me his story and, the things he went through after he got out and had gotten into trouble himself. And basically, seeing his success let me know that, this isn't the end. I can still do something.
A lot of people don't realize how isolating that kind of depression can feel, especially for men, I'm sure, who are taught to just deal with it quietly. So I really appreciate how honest you're being. And the fact that you found someone like Tom, someone who understood the world you came from and had his own experiences to compare, that's that's really powerful. Sometimes it only takes one person showing us that rock bottom doesn't have to be the ending for us to start seeing a different path for ourselves. It really shows a lot about your character that you were willing to learn from all of that and not let it define you permanently. I know in your questionnaire you mentioned your dad as well, and I didn't want to pull anything out of you that you're not comfortable sharing, but if you are, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your relationship with him and the role he played in all of this.
So, my dad told me after the third one, um, the officer actually had me in the back of the car and went and knocked on the door. I was staying with my dad at the time, and he was talking to him and watching your father look at you with disgrace while you sit in the back of a cop car is a different feeling. But I'm sorry. So he told me he loved me and he'd always support me. So at that moment, it clicked that even in my darkest times, someone was still in my corner. When he told me that, I was, kind of thrown back. Like, I've watched this man do nothing but work his ass off his entire life to take care of me and my brothers. And he was the ideal role model. And it tore me apart more to see him upset with me because of my choices. And all I wanted to do was be able to make him proud one more time.
I just want to honor how hard that must have been to relive. Watching a parent look at you with both heartbreak and love at the same time, that's a kind of moment that stays with you forever. And those are moments that shape us. Those are the moments that take everything we thought we were and force us to look at what's left of us. And hearing your dad say he loved you, even in your darkest moment, that's powerful. Because sometimes all it takes is one person reminding us that we're still worth fighting for. So I just want to acknowledge the weight of that and the courage it took to tell that part of your story.
And I think that's probably the hardest part was um, admitting to myself that I had a problem and that I did need help.
That's such an important thing to say out loud because admitting there's a problem is one of the bravest and scariest steps anyone can take, especially when ego is involved or pride or the fear of disappointing the people you love. Most people don't even get that far. Most people stay stuck in denial, but the fact that you were able to look at yourself and say, I can't keep doing this, that alone says a lot about your strength and your willingness to grow. So I want to go back to that third incident that you mentioned. The moment everything hit you at once, the shame, the love from your dad, the reality check, all of it. What did day one of, look, enough is enough, what did that look like for you? Was it a single moment that flipped like the switch, or was it a buildup that finally made you step back and say, okay, I can't keep living like this. Something has got to change?
So I wouldn't say that was my turning point. I still continued to drink after that, very heavily. But I quit driving. I quit getting behind the wheel and putting other people in danger. And then I finally decided that I was going to move to Florida, be close to my mom. And as much as I love her, my mother is 100% an enabler. And I moved down there thinking, get away from everybody, but still have someone. And all that turned into was me and my mother drinking. And it was not healthy at all for anyone. But I finally, I met someone, moved to Iowa where I am now. We had my daughter, and that's so I'd say 3 years ago when I found out she was pregnant was my day one.
Honestly, that makes complete sense. Sometimes the real turning point isn't our own pain, it's realizing we're responsible for someone else now. And that shift in purpose can hit harder than any rock bottom ever could. After that moment, once you started trying to change things, did you experience any setbacks? What did healing actually look like for you in the beginning?
Oh, absolutely. There's multiple setbacks of anytime I would face any type of issues or something that was hard. My first instinct was, well, let's grab a drink, take the edge off. Well, with me, it was never take the edge off. It was let's forget everything that happened. But those moments, they started to fade when I put my daughter first. I refused to be that way again with another child and put her first.
That's really honest. And I think a lot of people will relate to that instinct. It's so easy to reach for the thing that numbed you in the past, but it sounds like your daughter became the reason those patterns slowly started losing their power. Outside of your home life and becoming a dad once again, was there anything else that played a big role in your growth or healing? Whether it was routines, people, habits, anything that helped keep you grounded while you were changing your life.
And yeah, I found the gym. I I went from being out at the bar, and I found a 24-hour gym, and anytime I wanted to go drink, I decided I'm going to go work out. And it was my place to where I could let the anger and the self-hate out and do it in a positive way instead of hurting myself more.
The gym can be such a powerful outlet. It's not just the physical changes, it's the mental release, the structure, the way it gives you a healthier place to put everything you're feeling. That kind of shift can completely change someone's life.
Yeah, it was definitely for me. I mean, I was getting in great shape, but it was more of the mental break than the physical perks of it.
That makes so much sense. Sometimes the mental clarity that comes from showing up for yourself is the part that actually saves you. During that time, while you were trying to rebuild and find healthier outlets, was there anything that worked against you? Whether it was certain environments or people or habits, anything that made the process harder?
Um, I had no boundaries with friends, so the people I would go out and party with. I mean, they were good friends. We'd hung out many times without going out and drinking and just hanging out as friends. But anytime they would go out, they'd call me, "Hey, you want to come out?" And um, that was my kryptonite. Like, yeah, of course I want to go out.
Yeah, that makes total sense. When you're trying to change, but the people around you aren't, it becomes almost, I don't know, impossible to hold a boundary you don't fully have yet. So, with that, during that time, was there a point where you had to walk away from friendships that were enabling you or people whose lifestyles made it harder for you to stay on track?
I had to cut off several lifelong friends because all they were doing was bringing me down. And I even tried to sit down and have conversation with them. Like, look, I can't be doing this like this anymore. Like, we should all make a change because they were all heavy drinkers too. And they didn't want to change their lifestyle. And I refused to become that person again.
That takes a lot of strength, especially when it's people that you've known for a really long time. And unfortunately, like not everyone is willing to make those changes with you. And so choosing yourself in those moments is incredibly hard, but obviously it's necessary. Setting boundaries like that is never easy, even when it's the right thing to do. What did that grief feel like for you, having to let go of people you were so close to?
It felt exactly that. It was like losing your best friend, like without the funeral, and it was very rough because these were people not only that I would go out and have fun with, but they were people that I would confide in when I was going through something, and I didn't have that anymore. And then I met my buddy Tom, and we do very little drinking and a whole lot of talking and confiding in each other, and also just a lot of bullshitting about the family to kind of distract our minds.
Losing friendships like that really does feel like a death without the goodbye. And it leaves such an empty space that you don't quite know how to fill. But it sounds like Tom came into your life at exactly the right time, someone who could give you connection without pulling you backwards. And that kind of support can really shift the direction someone's life goes. So I want to ask you, who was the Stephen that started to emerge after 2021? What changed in the way that you thought, the way that you loved, the way you showed up for other people once you really committed to changing your entire life?
I try to give back, even if it's something simple as buying somebody coffee behind me in the line at Dunkin' or Starbucks. Um, there's a lot of homeless people in the city where I'm at now. If I ever have change or anything like that, I try to give it to them because you never know that little bit of money can give somebody hope to continue fighting for the next day.
Any small act of kindness can change someone's entire day. You really have no idea the impact it might have.
No, people put on a good front. They're very good at masking what's going on in their life. They say that your friends that are always smiling and happy are usually the ones that are struggling the most, and that was me. Was always happy, always laughing, and having the best time, but I was dying on the inside.
Oh, absolutely. People can look like they have it all together on the outside, but are just falling apart internally. And I think your honesty is such a reminder of that. That sometimes the loudest laugh or the biggest smile is coming from someone who's absolutely hurting the most. So, with all of that in mind, when you look back at who you used to be, do you ever find yourself feeling forgiveness towards that version of you? Or is that still something you're working on?
I think that's still a process. I look back with a lot of anger on the decisions that I made, but we're working towards forgiving it because if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be who I am now.
I completely understand. And you're right, because those experiences did shape you into who you are now. And the fact that you're even working towards forgiveness says a lot about your growth. And I'm curious, what about parenting for you? Do you feel like you parent different now than you did before everything happened?
Very, very much. My son, when he was growing up, and I was in law enforcement. He was in Maryland, and I was in South Carolina. So, seeing him was very holidays, birthdays, just major events that I could take the time off of work. And then moving to Maryland and then completely ruining that. So we're still trying to work on that relationship with him all these years later. But now with my daughter, I refuse to miss a moment.
That makes a lot of sense. And it sounds like you carry a lot of regret from that period with your son, but also a lot of intention with how you show up for your daughter now. And that contrast really shows the way that you've grown and what you value today. If you don't mind me asking, and you absolutely don't have to answer this, but if your son were to be listening to this episode, what do you hope he hears in your voice?
Um, I would say I hope he hears the passion that I have for life. Um, it's the that I'm just I'm human. We make mistakes, but we learn and we grow.
That's incredibly powerful. And I think there's something really healing in owning the fact that we're human, that we make mistakes, but we also evolve. And if he ever does hear this, I think he'll hear your sincerity and the way that you've chosen to grow instead of staying stuck in the moment. I want to take it back to something you mentioned earlier, finding your grounding in the gym. For someone who feels like they have nothing or feels completely lost, how does someone even begin to find that grounding moment for themselves?
For me, it was kind of just I had found new friends, and I'd met a friend and through work, and he just so happened to be in the gym all the time, and I was like, maybe let's try something outside of the box. I was never a big gym goer before that, and I'm just this, little chunky guy at the time, and he's this 6'3", just big old muscle guy, and he's like, okay, no problem, come work out, and we clicked.
That's so great to have. When you have the right person at the right time who can shift your whole direction. And sometimes all it really does take is just one person who says, come with me. And suddenly you're in an environment that pulls you forward instead of backwards. In this season of your life, how do you tell the difference between people who truly support you and people who might actually enable you?
Um, the ones that I talk to on a regular basis, that I'm not just a phone call to let's go out and do something. The people in my life that call me when something's going on and they just need to vent, or people I know that I can call and vent to, that it's not just all about going out and have a good time. It was hard to see the difference before because I thought they were calling to go out because they cared. They wanted me around. But that wasn't the case. It was just enabling the problem that I had.
That's such an important distinction. The difference between people who actually want you versus people who only want the version of you that fits their lifestyle. And it takes a lot of growth to be able to see that clearly. What is one thing about your story that still surprises you when you say it out loud?
That I made it. I made it out the other side.
And that's huge. And I think so many people listening are going to feel that because making it out the other side isn't just about surviving, it's about choosing to keep going when everything in you wanted to just give up. And that's something that you should really be proud of. For that version of you, the isolated, drinking, hurting version, if you could go back and talk to him, what would you tell him?
I would say keep your head up. Tomorrow's a new day. Forgive yourself for the choices you've made, and don't be so hard on yourself.
That's such a compassionate message. And honestly, it's something a lot of people need to hear. We're so quick to punish ourselves, but very rarely do we give ourselves permission to start over. What you just said is exactly the kind of hope someone in that place needs. What's the truth about recovery that no one really wants to say out loud?
It's hard. It's ugly. You're gonna fail. Nobody gets over it the first time. If your heart and mind aren't in it, you're not gonna get out of it. You've really gotta dedicate your life to getting better and heal from the things that put you there.
You're right. Recovery isn't pretty. It's messy, it's repetitive, and it takes so much more dedication than people realize. And I think hearing you say that out loud is important because a lot of people shame themselves for not getting it right the first time, when in reality, almost no one does. And it takes heart, it takes intention, and it takes showing up for yourself again and again. So, with everything that you've been through, what's left of you now? The part you're most proud of, the part you never thought you'd get back.
That I'm successful again. I've got a good job that I make more money than I've ever made in my life. I have the best relationship I could ever ask for with my brothers, my mom, my dad. It's it's been a journey, but I'm glad that it's all finally come full circle.
That's incredible. And I hope you really let yourself feel proud of that. To go from where you were to where you are now, rebuilding your career, your finances, and especially your relationships, that's not luck, that's work. That's growth. And it really shows how full circle your journey has become. And before we close this out, is there any final thing you want someone listening to take away from your story?
Just keep going. No matter how bad it looks, no matter how dark it is, tomorrow always comes. So continue to push and make sure you're there to see it too.
Stephen, thank you. Truly, thank you for sitting here with me today and trusting this space with parts of your story that most people never get to hear. Your honesty, your vulnerability, and your willingness to speak on what's really buried beneath the badge. It means more than you know, and I'm so grateful you chose what's left of me to share it.
Thank you for having me.
And for anyone listening who may see pieces of their own story reflected in Stephen's, especially when it comes to alcohol, please remember there are resources out there. Whether it's local AA groups, online meetings, or sober support communities, you never have to navigate any of this alone. And if today's conversation brought up anything heavy for you, or if you or someone you love is struggling, you can always call or text 988 for immediate support. There is always someone ready to listen. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. From the bottom of my heart, with all of the love in the world, I'll see you next week.